You're listening to the B&H Photography Podcast. For over 40 years, B&H has been the professional source for photography, video, audio, and more. For your favorite gear, news, and reviews, visit us at bnh.com or download the B&H app to your iPhone or Android device. Now here's your host, Alan White.
Greetings and welcome to the B&H Photography Podcast. Today's topic is animal photography, and we're going to be joined by two guests with different approaches to the subject. Joining us in the studio is wildlife photographer Stephen Morello. Steve is the author of The Traveling Nature Photographer, and when he's not working on personal projects, he serves as a photo instructor for Lindblad National Geographic expeditions. And after we speak with Steve, we're going to be joined via Skype by photographer Leshko to talk about her new book, Allowed to Grow Old: Portraits of Elderly Rescued Farm Animals. Okay, more than a picture taker, Steve Morello is a founding partner of Natural Habitat Adventures, a wildlife adventure organization dedicated to developing sustainable tourism and guide training programs in Peru, Tanzania, the Canadian Arctic, and right here in the United States. He serves on the board of directors of the Alaskan Whale Foundation, where he assists on research of the whales of Southeast Alaska. His latest project will be working together with tourism planners, scientists, and local fishermen to conserve a newly created marine sanctuary off the coast of Peru. His photos have appeared in National Geographic magazine and the New York Times, and he's a major contributor to the photo collection of the World Wildlife Fund. Welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Let's start by talking about the whale projects you're involved with, particularly the Alaska Whale Foundation. How were you introduced to the Southeast Alaska region, and did the interest grow out of your photography?
The organization is a little more than 20 years old. I've been with them now for about 4 years.
Okay.
And the interest, yes, it grew out of when I started my career as an adult, I guess. I was working.
None of us, by the way, have gotten to that point. We're still working as children.
Well, when you do, I have advice, career advice for you. But I started working with whales up in Massachusetts in Cape Cod.
And this goes back to your childhood, right?
Well, the like was back in my childhood.
Okay,
the interest. It was in my 20s when I started working with whales in Massachusetts. And then I morphed from whale research to photography. And being involved in research, it kind of created my particular genre of wildlife photography. I photographed a lot of scientists and the animals that they were working on. So for World Wildlife Fund, in the early days of my early time working with Geographic, it was for research and grants. So I photographed the people that they funded and the work that they were doing in various places in the world. So meeting the folks at Alaska Whale Foundation with a like interest and being able to kind of help them with images and things of that sort, we got to be friends, and then I was invited to serve on the board, and my involvement has become more and more ever since, and that was about 4 years ago.
Now, whales and photography, they were actually pretty well entwined, because photography is how you ID these animals. They're like the stray cats that show up on my deck for free handouts. It's their markings that ID them, little wounds, even scars and things of that sort. Am I correct about that?
Yeah. With humpback whales, it's the tail, the pattern on the tail, or other scars or things of that sort. With other species of whales, it's other markings in other places in the body. But yeah, so photography plays a role. Either still images, now we use a lot of drones, and the drones have scientific equipment attached to them, so that it continues and develops. The more that technology advances, the more that they're using these new technologies, and a lot of it typically comes down to imagery for research on the wildlife.
So you come from kind of the science and marine biology background.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, you're always helping people with their projects and things of that sort. And by doing so, it would give me stock to develop ideas to sell articles or stories later on. And then I guess it was with World Wildlife Fund, working up in Churchill, Manitoba, and becoming friends with biologists there, working on polar bears, and leading tours for World Wildlife Fund.
Okay. Photo tours? Or
photo tours,
general?
yep.
Okay, yeah.
With Natural Habitat Adventures. And they kind of, it was a quick and easy marriage.
Right.
And that blossomed then into other things.
I might be wrong, but Steve might be the first wildlife photographer we have on the show, coming from the scientific thing, going to photography. You're coming from the
Right.
research aspect of it, which is kind of interesting. And I think that would probably be an interesting twist to the tours that you give and the way you approach even photographing sounds, because you understand them differently.
And it's weird because I got to say, growing up, I never liked photography. I never tried it. Once I did, I loved it. Absolutely love pressing the button.
What kept you away? This is kind of what I wanted to get at before, is how the transition occurred.
Because I had friends who were photographers, and they were a pain
jerks.
in the ass. They really were. We would go on a hike, and then you got to stop every 5 minutes and get out the equipment, and you got to wait 20 minutes for them, and it's like, give me a break. Take the frickin' picture and
You're
let's
supposed
go.
to bring a book along. Don't you know that?
You're
supposed to carry a book with you.
or a sandwich. But and then it became a tool. Then it was a necessary tool. I bought a knicker mat million years ago, and all of a sudden it was like, wow, this is really, really fun. And then, because that was like 40 years ago, I was very fortunate and very blessed to be in a place documenting things that really had never been documented before. So there was a lot of interest from publications in places that wanted stories about whales. And they would send photographers, and all of a sudden these people became my mentors, and I got more and more involved. And then one day Geographic is doing a book, and they bought some of my images, and lo and behold,
A new career started.
then it happened. And all of a sudden I had to make a decision.
And
Which
can
did
you
I
kind
want
of
to do?
look back to when the style of your photography changed from simple documenting of maybe for science purposes or just in general to, all right, now let's kind of work on some composition, and maybe this is not the best research photo, but it sure is beautiful kind of stuff. Did that happen?
Yeah. And actually that's one of the things that I really try to impress upon students or anybody who's coming to me with photo questions is that it has to be a good photo that happens to be of a whale. It's not good enough to be a good photo of a whale. It's a good photo that happens to be of a whale. And those little epiphany moments came at different times. I think at different levels of my career where all of a sudden someone, and it would be funny because somebody would ask me a question and I would answer it. And then in my head, I'm thinking, I didn't know I knew that. Son of a gun.
No, it's true about teaching. That does come about a lot, doesn't it?
Yeah. And, or somebody would say something about an image of mine. And I'm thinking, that's exactly what I was thinking when it happened. And then I started realizing that really, and now one of the other strong points of my, if it's a strong point, it's one of the other things that I like to impress upon people when I'm teaching is that photography is very much about your impression of what you're seeing and much, much less about what you're actually seeing.
Mm-hmm. How are you interpreting what's there?
Exactly.
Well, there's a great phrase that I run around in my head a lot, which is, a good photo has to be better than the thing you're photographing.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what you're getting at, Yeah, he can use that.
And there again, people are always impressed because I get to travel around the world all the time.
That's why we asked you here. We want to hear about it. No.
So, and then I'm teaching somebody in my backyard, somebody taking a class, and they want to talk about Africa or Antarctica or some.
How about down the street?
Exactly. And I say, what you really have to do is you have to find the extraordinary in the ordinary things you see every day. That's going to make the good photo. And it's
Of course, yeah.
yeah.
I recently did a lens test here, and I did a lot of running around, and I looked at the final pictures, and I had about 16 pictures in the finished piece I did for Explorer, and 3/4 of them were taken within 2 blocks of my house.
There you go.
2 blocks.
Really? Because what do you know better?
Yeah, well, not even that. You just go out and you just see new things because.
And then the police came and they
Yeah,
shuffled
and that
you
was the
around.
end of it. Yeah, and the last, then the remaining pictures were in
Neighbors
the
called you.
station house.
Documenting.
It became a documentary.
The first time I bought an actual macro lens, and I was living in Florida, and I went in the backyard and I caught this tree frog. And I brought it in and put it on a plant to test the lens and to learn the little nuances of it. Next thing I knew, it was the end of the day.
Yeah.
I started in the morning, and then it was the end of the day, and it's like, wow.
Yeah, macro photography has
Yes.
a way of
It's
doing
a
that to you too,
whole new
doesn't it?
world.
Yeah,
Yes,
time
I
goes
mean,
away. Yes.
Yeah. So really, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I noticed too in checking out your website and your work that you incorporate a lot, not just the animals, but the people that you're finding on location. I mean, do you spend a lot of time with the folks when you're at the locations, and is that always part of what you're thinking about?
I really try to. For me, I'm a nature or wildlife photographer, but the places I go to, always it's the people that I meet there when I come back. It's like, wow, that's what I'm thinking about. I'm of course jazzed about the elephants or the whales or the birds or whatever, but you come back and you meet people and you learn about their life experiences, and it enriches you and hopefully makes you a better person.
And so in these situations, let me jump back. Are all your trips now basically workshop related trips, or do you take some personal trips where you're going by yourself?
I do take some personal trips.
And do you stay? How do you stay when you go? Where do you stay? Do you kind of, I don't know, rough it during the day and then go back to a nice hotel at night, or is it? I'm sure it's a mix of things,
yes.
But yeah,
it is a mix. I mean, I like to be comfortable now. Plus, you're carrying all the gear,
right?
And there is that concern about being able to go out with a camera body and a lens and leaving the rest of the stuff back in the room, in the either the hotel or the lodge or even your tent.
Yeah.
So I gotta say I like to be comfortable now.
Yeah.
I'm not 19 anymore,
Right.
so I don't do too much backpacking or anything. Occasionally, not very often, camping, but even the camping that I'm like, you go to Africa and you're in a mobile tented camp, and everybody's thinking, "Oh, I'm camping in Africa."
Right,
tent has a private toilet.
Right.
There's carpet on the floor.
Yeah.
It's not like any tent I've ever
I
had.
want to get back to talking about the workshops in general, but the workshops aside, do you prefer to kind of revisit places and look for the same type of animals, in order to get better photos, more photos, or do you always kind of want to find a new adventure, a new place, what do you kind of look for when it's time to make the next decision as where you're going to go?
I gotta say, I do really like going back. A lot of people always want to go to the new. But the more you spend in a place, the more you realize there's so much more to photograph, even at home.
Well, as I said, just
exactly
within 2 blocks of your house, there's always something new to discover. It's true.
And so I spent at least a month every year in Churchill, Manitoba, photographing polar bears for 20 years. And I still feel like I want to go back because I know I got these images in my head that I want to make. You look at the images you have and you think, if only this was a little this way or that, and
this is kind of what I wanted to get at. What is it that you are looking for still? Like, is there like that perfect shot, or is it what? It's hard to say, but I mean, or in general, what makes for a great animal photo, a wildlife photo?
Yeah, that's a tough one to answer. Yeah. I have some images, and people have asked about like the backstory to the image and what was happening and things of that sort. And some of them it's easy to tell, easy to talk about, but some of them are difficult to talk about because it's really personal. maybe I've been looking for that image in my head for years, or you got to go back to a place that you never thought you'd get to go back to, and you're just filled with emotion. And, and everything is working right.
Yeah.
I remember.
That's when you start getting nervous.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Yeah, it's like having a good hand in a poker game. I don't know what to do when that happens. Something's going right.
I have a question. You just were talking about polar bears, and something I'm curious about. We mentioned earlier that whales have very distinguishable marks, and it's actually easy to identify, specific animals repeatedly. You don't really get that with too many. I mean, penguins all look the same. Seagulls, they all look the same, or am I wrong? Have you spotted things that you can ID these sort of animals with?
The scientists working with those animals, I got to give them credit. But with most of the wildlife, I got to say, even as a research photographer, I probably am a sucky research photographer in that respect, where I'm not paying attention to the science. When I'm making an image, if someone says, you got to get photo IDs on that whale to match it, it's like, I got it. Don't talk to me. Now I need to make some images. And
so you still have this scientist artist thing going on inside of you, even when you're working there.
Yeah.
Okay, I got to get the assignment done, but then I'm going to go play.
Exactly. Then I want to make images for me, and then I don't care what whale it is. I'm looking to make good images, and that's the thing, polar bears. I tell people I photograph polar bears, and right away they're going to talk about climate change and are the polar bears disappearing and are they starving to death? That's not why I photograph polar bears. I photograph them to celebrate the animals that I'm seeing when I'm making the images. And it's not that I'm oblivious to the other stuff, and it's not that I don't care. And I certainly use my images and promote my images as a way to help in the cause of conservation. But when I'm making the images, I'm celebrating the life of the animal that I'm looking at.
And do you have kind of at least a mental checklist of a species of animal that you want to photograph, or a location that you want to go to that you haven't been to? And is there any? What would they be?
Australia.
Okay.
To anybody out there?
Yeah.
Needs me to go to Australia?
Right,
call me.
All right, I'll let you know.
I want to go to Australia a lot. I've been, again, I'm very lucky. I've been able to travel to so many places around the globe, but there are places. Madagascar, I've never been there. I want to go there. There are places, and there are specific animals that I want to make images of, but I like to be open to what unfolds in front of me. And I always say that, so I like to practice what I preach. And sure, if I was going to Australia, I'd be online checking images of all the places that I was going to be going to, and I'd make some notes and things of that sort.
But it's not like you have a goal like some bird photographers do to kind of, I want to get every species of whales or every type of such and such. That's not really a goal.
Right. Yeah. I don't. And it's funny because I've been, you hear that, there's a great gray owl at Quabbin Reservoir in Massachusetts, and all these people are flocking there to try to get photos of the great gray owl. And I remember happening to be there. And so while I'm here, I don't tend to chase the rarities, but I was there. And so I said, I'll take a look. And the great gray owl was across the field in the tree, and everybody had their big lenses aiming at that, and they're all talking about that. And I remember that I got involved in a house finch that was in the bushes just to the side of where all these people were. And it was, there was snow, and it was beautiful. The house finch was, and I found myself
concerned much with like sales, like secondary sales of images and stuff like that, and knowing, for example, this owl is going to be much more.
Should be. I really should be. But unfortunately, well, maybe not. When I'm photographing, I'm photographing. Later, if I'm trying to sell, then I'm kicking myself in the head and saying, why did I not?
Right.
Well, I should have paid more attention. But yeah.
You got to do what you got to do.
Exactly.
So let's talk a little bit about the gear that you use, because obviously it's specialized to some degree, at least the lenses. So can you start with your cameras and run us through it?
I still use 35 millimeter cameras, full frame Nikon. I have a D850 and a D5 that are kind of my workhorses. And then the range of lenses from fisheye to 500 is my longest right now.
Aside from all the backups that you need because you're going to places where you can't run down to 7-Eleven or to B&H to pick up an extra whatever, what do you pack in your bag that most photographers would not necessarily have that you do because you're remote doing wildlife? And
the camera gear is obviously essential. I decide what lenses, filters, things of that sort. Obviously, the standard backup batteries and stuff. I have to decide if am I going to need a flash? Am I not going to need a flash? That's always.
How often do you use flash for your stuff?
Sometimes fill flash.
Okay,
but with the newer sensors and being able to use higher ISOs, still a fill flash every once in a while is nice. But if I have to sacrifice in the weight, usually it's going to be a flash.
You carry everything on board with you when you fly? Or
I try. I really, really try. And it's getting harder and harder. God bless Nikon for making the new lighter weight lenses. So that's a little bit of a help. And eventually maybe I'll switch to mirrorless, which will help there too. But
arguably,
yeah.
But do you use a rolling case? How do you carry all that gear usually?
Usually a camera pack, backpack, and a rolling case. So I usually have 2 camera bags that I'm carrying on. And the one is, a Pelican case in case I have to check something. It'll be a little bit more secure. But usually I get away hemming and hawing and begging and pleading. And it's been.
What about, I imagine you spend a lot of time on boats. What about any kind of precautions regarding water and salt? And
that's where the Pelican case comes in real handy.
Yes, it does. So if I'm on a Zodiac and there's lots of splashing and stuff, I then put stuff in the Pelican case and have that there at my feet. All photographers, I guess, we have an incredible amount of camera cases. So I have some that are waterproof, some that are not.
And none of them are quite perfect.
No, they aren't. It's amazing.
Do you bother with silica gel at all, those little packets?
No, and, I haven't in my life, but the problem was, you go to the Amazon and they become saturated.
And unless you have a microwave oven or something like that, they're useless.
So I have, I've spent extended time in, say, the Amazon. I'm going to be there a month, and I know it's humid. I've done the old trick where you get a cardboard box and you get a light bulb on a pigtail, and at night you put everything in the cardboard box and you put the light on and you cover that with towels and things, and that the heat from the one light tends to keep things dry. So little tricks like that.
It's a good trick.
One of the things I always bring with me is an extension cord, so that I have, now I have a little cube that will turn one plug into 4 or 5.
Ziploc bags I found also. One of the things that I would do going in and out of humid environments, you put all your gear, say you're going from real hot tropical into air conditioned room, put everything into Ziploc bags, and so when you go out in the morning, all that sweat, rather than covering your lenses and stuff, is on the bag, and then when the equipment acclimates, just open up the bag and it's dry. That's what I would do, but that's a problem.
Yeah, it is. And sometimes I use, your camera backpacks they're basically a cooler. So I'll do the same thing where I'll use the cooler as a way to let the cameras acclimate slowly. But that is an issue.
What about memory and storage? Do you bring,
lots of extra cards? Yeah, and I bring portable hard drives. And yes, now I'm very thankful.
You bring laptops with you usually?
Bring my laptop. Yeah. For me, that was the switch between film and digital was really less about the camera for me because it's all the same, you know? So we're saying ISO instead of ASA and noise instead of grain, right? But it was the peripheral stuff. That became the pain in the ass. Now I got to carry the laptop and the storage devices. And
but how much film did you used to carry?
It's true.
All right. So and a laptop takes less room than 8 bricks of film.
It does, but I had to learn all the
Points
programs.
Points taken.
That was the deal.
But you also know what you have when you're leaving. There's that little mystery saying, okay, we're done. Did I get it? Don't
Hands
know.
down, I feel digital has just, obviously it's revolutionized.
I think,
it's made such a difference. It really has. And I wouldn't want to go back. And I know there are purists out there and they're still talking. They have a film camera with them and things. And
not me.
Yeah,
I got 7 of them.
Yeah.
Do you ever just for the heck of it go back and shoot film just for the sport of it?
No, I don't have the energy to deal with that. Yeah, I'm quite lazy.
So let's talk about the telephoto, the long lenses. Because I'm assuming you must be using the most, or at least a lot.
Yeah.
And are you always shooting with stabilization? Any tricks about that and whatever?
Yeah, and I'm still a tripod guy. So when I can, I use a tripod. When I can't,
carbon fiber, aluminum.
Carbon fibers.
Best of the best.
Yeah.
Single frame or continuous? How do you prefer to shoot?
Continuous high speed. And I'll tell you the reason. It is not for the shoot and spray or hope and spray thing. It's because of stabilizing the camera. If I am hand holding it and on a boat, so much.
You're all gimbaling,
So by shooting a burst, that second, third, fourth frame always are going to be more sharp than that first frame.
Okay.
So, and I want it ready for the next image. And for me, a lot of it is about preparation, about being ready for that next image. And that's going to make the difference. I'm not counting on my motor drive to be my eye.
I used to shoot boats a lot, and I would always be on continuous. And I prefer to shoot single frame all the other times. But in situations like that, that's really what you have to do.
Yeah, it's a tool.
Steve, what kind of workshops are you running these days? What are some of the classes and workshops you're involved with?
Well, I guess my big one, I do it with another photographer, Jeff Maritzen.
Sure.
Yeah, we know Jeff,
And we run a workshop in Costa Rica twice a year, once in the spring, once in the fall. We have one coming up in November. And it's a great, it's my favorite workshop, because Costa Rica and the subjects just present themselves everywhere. Bam, everywhere you turn around.
What are you generally looking for when you're there?
There's everything from the monkeys to the colorful birds. We work with a local herpetologist who, we go out with him to do the colorful frogs and the snakes and all those things like that. So we get a lot of great macro stuff. And we do walks at night along the waterways. It's very exciting. However, it's also really a challenging place to photograph. And if you come away from that workshop learning things, I feel you are ready to tackle the world, so to speak.
What kind of challenges are you talking about now specifically?
First, there's the heat and the humidity.
Okay,
just what you had mentioned before. Just the working environment. You're sweating. You're just sweating all the time. So you're dealing with drops of sweat falling off your face, and you got to pay attention to that. You're dealing with, we're out at night, and we're hand holding like little go lights. Tiffin makes the little go lights there, or using strobes to do macro work at night. And, you got to pay attention. Is there a leaf blocking my light, or the angles and things of that sort?
And why does that mosquito keep coming into my ear?
Yeah, exactly. And, am I bumping up against something else that's going to hurt me? Right. Some spider that's going to bite me.
It's not a Disney movie. There's some real ugly stuff out there.
Yeah, exactly. There's venomous snakes and stuff. So I said maybe I shouldn't say that to get people to come to the workshop. So this is going to risk your life.
How many photographers actually survive your workshops?
Yeah, exactly.
How many did you leave behind?
Oh, man.
But what is the kind
and then
of
there's backlight and stuff when you're working with monkeys in the trees. So it's challenging. But when you nail it, it's just fantastic.
And how much of the workload is kind of finding the right people on the ground and the organization, or is that you've done enough times that it's kind of set in place?
We work with a resort called Crocodile Bay Resort, and they are actually known as a fishing place, a fishing resort. But the owners of it were actually heard or saw a live stream slideshow that Jeff did here at B&H. And
probably at Optic,
Yeah, at Optic. Yeah. And then he contacted Jeff and said, we'd like you to run a workshop here. And he called me and said, can we do this together?
Do you have all ranges, all levels of photographers?
Yes. Yeah, we do. Yeah. And it's great that there are two of us working the workshop at the same time, because we can do that. If somebody has a question that's more advanced, and they're looking, how am I going to get the silhouette of the frog on the top of the leaf from me photographing below, and things of that sort. Whereas you have someone else who's saying, most of the time I'm out there with my phone. What can I do? And so you can hit every single level.
How many people do you have on the average tour?
Usually they're under 10.
Okay, so it's a manageable, intimate group.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And we work them like hell. We get up in the morning early, and we typically are out till dark, and then on a couple of the evenings after dark, after dinner, we go back out again. So it's a packed week that they're with us. But hopefully they learn a lot and they come away with some nice images.
And do you take some time to shoot for yourself usually, or is that just...
When with the workshop,
yeah.
I mean, one of the teaching tools is us photographing, but really we're there for the guests.
Right.
If I need to or want to, I can get there early, or I can stay a few extra days, and that's fine. But when you're teaching, you're there for the guests.
How is it different from the Lindblad versions? I imagine those are a little more intense or a little more photocentric. It sounds like they might be, or
the Lindblad trip, it's less intense. Although if somebody really wants to be intensive, hey, we're there for them. Any of the people who teach for them. So, and, usually on a Lindblad trip, I'll do a program and then help people with their cameras. And then I'm out in the field with them when they want or need me. I can be on any trip. It doesn't have to be a photo-specific tour. If it is a photo-specific tour, then it's a little more intense. But you're on a ship with 60 to 100 people, depending on
so
what ship.
So sometimes the Lindblad Nat Geo expeditions, people aren't taking pictures? They're not there?
They're always taking pictures, but they're not a photo-specific trip. Okay. But they still have someone like me on board to help. And there always are people who...
It's like the attending physician.
Yes.
Okay. There's always a physician on call. We have
photographer
on call.
Exactly.
Hey.
But the association between Lindblad and Nat Geo, it's Nat Geo. So there is a really strong photo component to any of their programs.
And these tend to be more... let's see if I get the right word. Pelagic, is that the word? Like out on boats with
on boats. And Nat Geo has some photo or some expeditions that are land based, but the Lindblad Nat Geo ones are all boat based.
And you sleep on the boat.
Is that what pelagic means? I've never heard that word before.
Pelagic, it's open ocean.
Open ocean.
It means.
I learned something today.
Yeah, it's a good thing.
Yeah, it doesn't happen often these days, but I'll mark this one down. Okay.
So I know that's probably one of your specialties. I don't know how to just throw this wide open, but tips, tricks on shooting whales and
for different things. It's important to kind of control the excitement, because it's always exciting.
Sure.
You know, and some of the classic images of, say, the whale's tail, the fluke coming up, to understand where you want the fluke in position, what position you want the fluke in for the water dripping off the edge and things. So, you know, to understand what image you want out of that series you're making, and to get that image.
So it probably makes sense to be able to actually, before you start taking, watch what's going on for a while.
Exactly, yeah. Oh, that's a really good tip, is that, you know, you typically have time before you get to the animal, before you get close enough where you're going to start making images. Pay attention, you know.
See.
Yeah. How many times is it up at the surface before it, how long is it up at the surface before it dives? Does it fluke every time it makes a dive? Because sometimes they don't. What behavior it's doing, and look at the behavior and say, geez, what is it that makes that so special that I want to make an image of it? Not just blindly, did I just spit all over your mic? Blindly photographing and using the, you know, spray and pray technique there. Pay attention to what the image is going to be. Look at your horizons.
Are there surface things that go in the water before an animal? I mean, obviously, a large whale, there's got to be like a rise of water, or maybe do birds take off or something of that? I mean,
sometimes the birds are coming in if they're feeding, if the whale is going to surface, and, you know, not if it's doing not like a breach where it's coming up quickly where you don't know where it's going to happen. But, you know, sometimes you can see the whale before it surfaces. And, you know, if you want like that moment of the spout coming out of the nostrils of the whale, you start photographing before it happens.
Yeah.
You know, dolphins riding the bow, and you want the dolphin up out of the water. Try to anticipate when it's going to happen and start photographing before.
It's necessary.
Because if you wait till you see it, it's gone and you're not going to get it.
Yeah.
You have on your website a pretty cool shot of a seal eating what looks like a fluke, you know, and then I imagine, you know, shots with babies. These are kind of the go-to shots, or the best
behavior. I mean,
behavior shots. Yeah.
Portrait of an animal is nice in context, maybe with other images to tell a story. But if you're looking on a one image, what's it saying to you? And if you can get behavior, interaction between individuals, or its habitat or whatever. You know, it is a still image, but you want as much. I always tell people you want to give your images as much a vocabulary as you possibly can, so that that image can tell the story without you having to say anything.
All right, Steve, it's great talking to you today. Picked up a tip or two. I even learned a thing or two. What was that word I learned?
Yeah. Well, I guess you didn't.
Yeah, that word. Yeah, I got to write it down so I can remember it.
Yeah, starts with
Because I'm going to start throwing that word around a lot.
Yeah, please do.
Steve, if people want to see more of your work and learn about what workshops are coming up, where should they go?
Well, SteveMorello.com is my website, and it's the Costa Rica workshop is coming up in November 9th through the 15th. And you can see about that under the workshops on my website.
Available?
Yes,
okay.
Absolutely. Or you can go to Crocodile Bay Resort and look there as well. But SteveMorello.com is my website, and if anybody has questions, they can contact me through them.
Are you working on any specific projects outside of the jobs that you're doing?
Yeah,
Do you have like a book, series or anything particular you're working on?
Well, in Peru, northern Peru, on the coast, there's a little village called Punta Sal.
I've been there.
And that's...
I've been there. Yeah.
It is beautiful. It is a place where humpback whales breed and calve. And there's this reef that has gotten protection now. The problem is that the Peruvian government hasn't put in the effort to have enforcement there. And so I'm working with a couple of other people, and we're trying to get attention to this area of the world, and hopefully with the public's focus on that, the Peruvian government will bring in a little bit more protection for the reef. But in that community, did you notice the balsas? They're the boats the local fishermen use.
Yes.
They are basically rafts. like Robinson Crusoe. Well, those boats have been in use for the past 150,000 years, not by those very same fishermen. But
they did varnish them a few times.
Yeah. But it's pretty much the only place where those are still in use. So I'm been photographing them. I'm working on a project to do a story about the balsas, and then that's part of the overall scheme to get people to notice Little Punta Sal.
Okay, and stay tuned. I'm going to come back with Leshko. Stay tuned.
We hope you're enjoying this edition of the B&H Photography Podcast. Send us a tweet at BHPhotoVideo, #BHPhotoPodcast.
Okay, we are back. Leshko is a photographer whose work examines themes relating to animal rights, aging, and mortality. Her photos have been published in The Atlantic, The Boston Globe, The Guardian, Harper's Bazaar, and The New York Times, and widely exhibited. Her prints are in the collection of the Museum of Fine Arts, Houston, and the Boston Public Library, among others. She's joining us to talk about her latest book, Allowed to Grow Old, Portraits of Elderly Rescued Farm Animals, which is hot off the presses. Welcome to our show.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
The first thing I want to talk about, I've seen a lot of animal photographs and animal portraits. We all have around here. And I was looking through your book, which is absolutely stunning. And what struck me pretty early on was that I kept being drawn to the eyes of these animals. And it was very odd because animals tend to, if you look at them, they have sort of a startled look in them quite often. I did not see one startled expression in this entire book. It's almost as if these animals are at peace with themselves or at peace with you at the very least. Can you talk about that?
The animals definitely were photographed at sanctuaries. So they were in pretty much idyllic setting. These sanctuaries provide a home for rescued animals. They rehabilitate them, and then they allow these animals to grow old and live in freedom. I think some of the peace that you see on their faces is a reflection of that. They have been extremely well cared for, with the exception of their lives prior to being rescued. A number of them experienced horrific trauma prior to being rescued. And it really is remarkable that they have found this peace in their later years. I also spent a lot of time with the animals before even photographing them. It was important to me that I was not in the picture. And what I mean by that is I didn't want to photograph the animals reacting to my presence. I wanted to try to create a portrait that provided some insight into who they were. Animals do have unique personalities, and it was important to me that these portraits illustrate that.
Can you speak a little bit about the process exactly? I mean, there's some photos I'm looking here that are at ground. The camera must have been at ground level. Are you on the ground with them? Are you spending much time in their stalls, in their places? Do you use remotes at all? And how can you walk through this?
I am extremely low tech, mainly because I wanted to not be threatening to the animals. So I pretty much entered their enclosures with my Hasselblad 503 CW camera and film. I tried using reflectors early on, and goats really liked chewing on them. I found that it was best to just be nimble. I didn't even use tripods because even elderly animals move pretty quickly. And it was important to me that I meet these animals on their terms. In the book, I talk about power dynamics in portrait photography. And I've never fully been comfortable with this. The photographer is in pretty much complete control. Sure, the subject can change their facial expressions and gestures, but the photographer is the one who determines what's in the frame and when to precisely click the shutter. The photographer is also in power long after because they determine what's going to be printed and how it's going to be printed. So the portrait photographers who I really respect are the ones who are sensitive to those power dynamics. I talk about Shelby Lee Adams as a shining example. He had spent decades documenting the people of Appalachia, and he treated his subjects as collaborators. He would routinely take Polaroids to show them and solicit their feedback. I couldn't do that with the animals I was photographing, but I wanted to, at the very least, be mindful of their comfort, keep them as relaxed as possible, and meet them on their terms. So I spent a lot of time with the animals. Some animals acclimated immediately to my presence, and I could just start photographing right then and there. Others were pretty shy, and it would take days, sometimes even, to get to the point where I could get sufficiently close to them to photograph them.
Would you attribute that to the nature of the particular animals or the nature of their experience in life, where they were kind of like shy about you?
So it's a combination of the fact that these animals were trauma survivors, many of them, and the fact that some of them were just really shy to new people. And if I got the sense that an animal I was trying to photograph really seemed uncomfortable, I would back off immediately. I would, potentially try again later on. But animals are fairly good about conveying their wish to be left alone. So I also took those cues very seriously.
And were there several animals that you really wanted to photograph, but you had to pass on for those reasons? And I guess the follow-up would be how many photos would you take? How often would you shoot certain animals, and would you consider it done, after a couple shots if you thought you had what you needed?
I would really try to photograph an animal at least on a few occasions. On these sanctuary trips, I would spend at least a week when I would visit. And there would usually be, on the first day, I would be introduced to the older animals at the sanctuary. And then there would be a smaller list of animals that I would really want to focus on. So for me, it was more developing a rapport with a few animals than photographing every elderly animal that they had. So there would be a couple animals that I would really focus my energies on and then devote the week to photographing them.
What was your criteria, if I may ask?
That's a good question. To some extent, I followed my gut. I was definitely looking for a range of elderly experiences. I certainly was drawn to the older looking animals. But then there were some animals that I was also drawn to because they had a sense of strength and defiance about them. Bessie, a cow who's featured early in the book next to one of the dedication pages, she had such a sass about her and an attitude that I just absolutely loved. So, of course, I had to photograph her.
I'm looking at the photo now.
Yeah. She's giving me a little attitude there.
Yeah, I can see that. About to roll her eyes. Can cows roll eyes? Yeah. I don't know, but it looks like it. That's pretty cool. And were there other people from the farm there? Were there the handlers or the people that worked the farms with you, or did you have just time alone with the animals?
It varied from sanctuary to sanctuary. There were sanctuaries that I visited multiple times in the project. Mm-hmm. So by the second visit, they were pretty comfortable with me, and they knew that I knew how to close the enclosures properly and respect the animals' boundaries. So for the most part, I did work independently. It was pretty funny, though. Early on in the project, I was definitely out of my comfort zone. I grew up in a industrial town in New Jersey, Carteret, exit 12 off the Jersey Turnpike. A town known for its bars, churches, and oil refineries. And so I was never comfortable in a rural setting. So the first time I entered one of these farms, I didn't even know how to unlatch and latch a gate. The sanctuary director who was giving me the tour had to walk me through even the most basic things. I was very fortunate that she didn't just laugh me off the sanctuary and instead took me seriously. And I ended up visiting that shelter multiple times in the course of the project.
Was there ever a thought to do it with a different format or different kind of camera, or even not necessarily a portrait as these are, but more of an environmental portrait, or incorporate the workers and things like that?
Yeah, I think incorporating the sanctuary workers will be something I may want to do down the road. For me, I wanted to keep the focus entirely on the animals I was photographing. Animals have been photographed widely in the history of photography, but it is rare for an animal to be photographed in such a way that the focus is on the animal as an individual. And what I mean by that is the animal isn't a prop or
a trophy or a prize, one of those.
Exactly. Yeah. Or, part of the scenery. We've seen a lot of animals in farm photography, but those pictures aren't about the animals themselves. So I really wanted to keep the focus on the animals and treat these as portraits, because my end goal was to show that these animals have unique personalities and have emotions, and in many respects are no different from the dogs and cats that we have loved and that we share our homes with.
What's the root of this book? What got you started here? Where are the seeds?
I started the project pretty much by accident. I had been focused for a few years on caring for my mom, who had Alzheimer's disease, and my dad also had cancer and required a lot of assistance for that period. My sister and I had really focused several years on their care. And I hadn't thought much about photography during that time. There are a number of photographers who have photographed their parents in decline. I didn't feel comfortable taking that approach. And I also was, quite honestly, so emotionally spread thinly, being a caregiver and being present as a daughter and as a sister, that I just didn't have the emotional bandwidth to think about photographing at that time.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense.
So it was a profound experience, though, as you can imagine, and I knew it would eventually find its way into my work. About a year later, had a chance encounter with a blind old horse named Petey, and I only had my Holgas with me at that time. I had been an avid toy camera photographer during that period, and so I grabbed my Holga and spent the afternoon with Petey. I was really drawn to him, but I didn't quite know why. And when I got negatives back and looked at my film, it was pretty clear to me that I was drawn to Petey because of my own fears of aging and the emotions that I had still unresolved relating to my mom and dad's decline. And I also knew immediately that the Holga was the wrong camera for the work. I wanted the images to be unflinching in their detail. I didn't want them to be sentimental in any way. So I wasn't necessarily thinking of it as a project at that point, but I did decide to pursue taking more pictures of animals. And there was a sanctuary about an hour and a half from where I live that I visited several times later that fall. And took the earliest pictures. Once I began realizing this was a project, and that came out of feedback that I had received from portfolio reviews that I attended when I presented these images. Because prior to that, I was thinking that I would take these pictures and maybe show them to some friends and family, and they wouldn't go beyond that. And I had attended Photo NOLA portfolio review and had received really positive feedback on the work. And that's when I realized that there may be a project there. But when I began going to sanctuaries and meeting these rescued farm animals and hearing their stories, quickly the project became a lot more than examining my fear of aging and working through my emotional baggage. It really quickly shifted to an advocacy project in that I wanted to use these images to create an awareness of factory farming and the sentience of farm animals, and to tell these animals stories. So the work definitely evolved from its inception to where it is now. And I try to discuss that evolution in the introduction of my book.
I'm kind of surprised that you were not really an advocate necessarily for animal rights or sanctuaries prior to this. Was this something that was in your consciousness?
I had been a vegetarian all of my adult life, and I think I had always been drawn toward advocating on behalf of farm animals. But it wasn't until I began to meet these animals in person and learn their stories that the work really became focused on advocating for these animals.
And how long was the process? How many farms did you work at, and how long? When did you know? Okay, I've got what I needed. The project is coming to an end.
Yeah, one of the benefits of working with a publisher and working with other people is they helped let me know when the
Time's
work was
out.
done. Because I could easily see myself still photographing. And in fact, I probably will continue to take these portraits. When I visit these sanctuaries, I can't imagine that I wouldn't be still drawn to these older animals. But yeah, having the external deadline from a publisher really helped considerably as far as that goes.
And the process, the shooting process, the project.
So that was off and on for several, I would say about 8 or 9 years. And the writing for the book really was some of the more challenging aspects of the production for me. There were things that I definitely wanted to say, and in the introduction and research that I had done that I wanted to share with readers. And I wanted to tell the animal stories, but finding the right words, it was definitely challenging. There were definitely some days that I felt like I spent chasing my tail, but I got through it. And my first encounter with Petey and the images that I had taken at the first sanctuary I had visited were done in 2008.
Wow. So long process. Yeah, it's a good long process. And when did you know that you were going to turn it into a book as opposed to an exhibit, or when did the publishers come to you, or vice versa, and say, okay, we have something, and then you had to crank it up to another level?
Fairly early on, I began to think of it as a book. Part of that was because in the portfolio reviews I had attended, I had met with different publishers who were extremely enthusiastic about the work. And then as the work began to really take on that advocacy focus, it became important to me that these images be seen by a larger audience. And I wanted to use a book as a way of getting this work in the hands of people who might not necessarily go to art museums and art galleries or be able to afford my prints. When my work had gone viral at one point, my galleries and I were flooded with print inquiries, and most people were unable to afford my limited edition prints. I can't afford my limited edition.
Well, you should sell a few and then you could buy one.
There you go. Yeah. So,
you just proved you're a true photographer, right?
My dealers are definitely taking care of that for me, thankfully. I wanted to produce something that was accessible to a wide audience, especially given the focus of the work.
Yeah. Well done. The book's great.
Yeah. I think it's also important to note it's for animal lovers, this book, and it's also a book for people who just into portraiture. You can't say that it's a portrait book or an animal book. It is portraits of animals, and I think
photography book.
It's a photography book, and there's a lot of great stuff in there, and it's well executed and also well written. I read a lot of your introduction, and you explained why you did it and how you did it. It's we were talking about camera gear, John and I, when we were looking through it, and you summed up one little paragraph about what you did. The Holga wasn't good. 4x5 is too clunky, and Hasselblad was right online. So,
it was pretty
good.
funny that I even entertained the idea of doing a 4x5, using a 4x5 camera for it. I wanted that kind of detailed negative, but it just would have been impossible to use it. As it is, the Hasselblad was a fairly slow setup, particularly given the low light conditions that I was photographing. And
did you ever add light? I mean, you talked about the reflector, but
no. Again, I really wanted to not be disruptive to the animals. So I followed them to wherever they were, and I did not introduce any additional light, which would sometimes be challenging. And I would get an image that I absolutely loved. The animal's expression was perfect, but the lighting was just really off. Or the lighting would be perfect in a given image, but I didn't feel like it reflected the personality of the animal. For me, the images couldn't just be pretty pictures of a pig or a cow. They needed to be portrait of Teresa or Bessie. So that is partly why it was such a long process.
Hasselblad's a beautiful tool for photography. It's a great camera. But when you do press the shutter, the mirror going up and down is sort of like a car door closing. Did you startle any animals? Because, I mean, it's a great camera except when the mirror goes up.
You raise an excellent point. The shutter is quite loud. And there was one group of animals in particular. They were Santa Cruz sheep who had once been feral. And of all the animals that I had met, they were the ones that I was particularly sad for, because even though they were treated wonderfully and they had a lot of space and they were pretty much in the best possible place they could be, they still were in captivity. They were not wild any longer. But because of the fact that they were once feral, they were very shy around new people. And it would sometimes take me about an hour to inch my way close, step by step, to the sheep that I was photographing. And then I would I'd crouch down, get one image in, the shutter would go off, and it would just...
That's it, game over.
And then I'd have to start all over again. So those images of the two Santa Cruz sheep in the book, those took easily a week each to get. So, yeah.
Yeah, they don't have silent mode, those cameras. Nope, they don't have it.
No, you definitely have to be very patient when you're working with that camera and photographing animals.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. If people want to see more of your work, where can they go, aside from buying your book?
Yes. Well, the book is definitely a good place to start. And Photo Eye Books is now selling signed copies of the book. So that's definitely a good place to get it.
And that's Photo
it's also
Eye
on
Book. Can you say that again? So
Photo Eye Bookstore.
Okay.
They're based in Santa Fe, and they take online orders. Also, Amazon and Barnes & Noble, of course. My dealers, Richard Levy Gallery and Clamp Art, are also selling signed copies of the book. I have a solo show coming up at the Richard Levy Gallery. They're based in Albuquerque, and I love calling them my dealer in Albuquerque, by the way, as a pretty bad reference. So their exhibition is going to run from April 26th through June 7th, and then I've got 2 solo shows in the fall. One at Clamp Art from October 3rd through November 16th, and then another at the Griffin Museum of Photography in Winchester from October 24th through December 6th.
And how big are the prints?
I was previously exhibiting the work only at 9 by 9 inches for the image size. I wanted them to be intimate in their feel. I wanted people to come up and look the animals right in their eyes.
You can't just walk by the picture. You got to walk up to it.
Yeah. But then with the newer images that I've released, particularly for the larger animals, I began to realize that a larger print would also be powerful in its own way.
Yeah, the details too. Yeah.
So for the newer images, I'm offering them also at an 18 by 18 inch image size. Still not large by
that's still manageable
standards, but larger than the initial grouping.
Yes. And just to throw this in the book, there's also a list of the sanctuaries that you visited, which are pretty much all around the country. It looks like Texas,
and
New York, California.
They are all nonprofits, so I encourage everyone to support them. And a number of them have tours, guided tours that are open to the public. So I also encourage you all to visit them and get to know some of these animals.
Cool. Very good. Issa, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Okay. Life is about choices, which is why I truly believe that if you are not a subscriber to the B&H podcast, you should head on over to Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Overcast, or Spotify and choose to subscribe. And do keep in mind, you can always find this on the B&H Explorer website and the B&H Photography Podcast Facebook group, which is up, running, and going gangbusters. For now, on behalf of Jason, John, and myself, thank you so much for joining us today.